Okay, so today we're going to start by getting our brakes put in here on the left hand side of the tractor. What I have to do first is I got to install the camshaft that actually actuates our brakes. This one here, I've already got the new lever installed, and I say new because the Selecto Speed had just this arm, which is what actually actuates the brake. This is all the parking brake mechanism here, and this is all new here, as well as the little teeth down here. Now keep in mind, these are tractor specific. The 600 and 800s, these are a lot bigger than the row crop. So be sure you get the right one for your tractor. And of course I already have the bushing in here where our little ball socket goes. We need to grease this. And the more grease you have on this, the better it's going to feel, because for whatever reason they made this a ball socket and our bushing's a cylinder, so it barely rides on this, and if you don't have enough grease in here, this kind of gets sloppy. Whenever you put this grease in there, take and get a good dollop on your finger. Do that about 2 or 3 times. Just pack as much in there as you can. Okay, so now when we go to put the cam in there, the other end is going to run right through here and rest on our brake backing plate. So go ahead and take your backing plate, now on installing these, there's this area here where the 2 pins go in to hold your shoes. If you're doing this on a 600 or 800, this is going to be level to the ground. If you're on a row crop, it's going to be turned up a little bit like that. Take it and just kind of slide it on. And I just barely have it on the studs. Now I'm going to take the brake cam, I'm going to turn it and get it into the backing plate first. I'm going to push it outward to get the cam in, and then I'm going to slide it in. And I don't know if the camera's seeing this or not, but I have a bunch of grease that come out. But it is still pretty sloppy, so I'll pull it back out and see if I can get this grease back in there. Now it's a little tighter. However, some more did come out, but it's okay. Like I say, the more you can get in there, the tighter it will feel. And make sure that your parking brake can be activated. As far as this is concerned, I did not film any of this. However, this bolt I torqued to 45 foot-pounds. The little pawl in there, I put some grease in it to try to keep it from rusting, because these are known to rust up and not work. This little pin here is a 3/16 by 1 inch rivet. And this side here was actually loose, so I put a little bit of Loctite on it before it slid in. and got that to hold in place. And I do have to come back and touch it up because it's still bare metal, but that's pretty much it on that. Just line it up on the keyway in here, torque your bolt, set this mechanism up, which it pretty much only goes one way, and you're good to go. So now I'm gonna move my camera back here to get you a better view of what I'm doing back here. But that's the camshaft installed, and that's pretty much all we're gonna do to it at the moment. So now that we're back over here, we're gonna now go ahead and fully seat this backing plate. And then we'll get our bolts and lock washers on here. Well, our nuts and lock washers. And then we'll get these all torqued down to 140 foot-pounds. Okay, and what I did was I did 70 foot-pounds first, and then I went back and did 140. So on this video of me putting this back together, this is going to go kind of quick. I will have another video of me more explaining this, which I'll put a link in the description for that. The video in the description is going to be more informative about how you go about putting these on. So I'll be sure to include that down there. So if you're unsure of how to do these, just check that video out. It'll explain it a lot more. Alright, so first thing we're going to do before we put the axle in is I'm going to take some silicone lube, which is the clear silicone, and I'm going to put it in here on this seal. And that's just to, you know, protect it from being dry whenever we start moving this thing. Okay, so on the axle, first thing we're going to do is go ahead and just slide it in. Then we got our outer bearing, which is a 28985. And then we have this big spacer washer. Go ahead and slide them all the way in. Kind of get the bearing to seat into the race. Now the next step is fun. And I say that because we got to lift up the big bull gear up into the housing and get it onto the stub axle without dropping the bearing or that large spacer. Now when we put this gear in here, if you see, there is a kind of a flat side here and a side with the hub sticking out. We want that hub to face towards the outside of the tractor. And one thing you can do, and I did notice this on the other side and I just now remembered it, you can go ahead and stick the bearing in here and then the spacer. They will kind of sit in this retainer. And then you just have to slide the gear up and then push the axle in. So let's put the gear up in there. Slide our axle in. Okay, now we're splined into the gear. And our bearing is on. So that's the way I would recommend doing it. Put your bearing in and then the spacer that will hold. Slide the gear in and then slide your axle in. The next thing is going to be a thrust washer. and we have two of them. The big thrust washer goes first. It's going to slide on, and then our inner bearing is going to go on. So the inner bearing is a 25580. And then our little thrust washer will go on. And then our nut. So now that that is all there, we have to torque that nut to a minimum of 200 foot-pounds. The reason I say it's a minimum of 200, it has a cotter pin in it. So just like a ball joint, we need at least 200 foot-pounds as the spec. If we go to 200 and our cotter pin hole does not line up, we're going to have to tighten it even more. Now on the right side, I got lucky. It lined up perfectly at 200. Hopefully I can shoot 2 for 2 on this, but we'll see. To tighten that thing down, we obviously cannot set the tractor on the ground because this is loose. So I'd recommend putting a couple lug nuts on here to protect our studs and getting a prod bar and just locking that in and holding it. It's pretty difficult to do it by yourself, but it can be done. There, I just got a couple of my old lug nuts. I'm just threading them on a few threads. And now I'm gonna go get my big pry bar. Take our 2-inch socket and our torque wrench, set her at 200. And since I'm gonna be pulling this way on the torque wrench, I want my prod bar in there like that. That way I'm pushing that way on the axle. Like I said, this is easier with 2 people, but one can do this. And there's the proof of it. So that's 200. And let's see if I got lucky or not. And I did. It lined up perfectly with the cotter pin hole. This notch is right in line with my cotter pin hole. So that worked great. I'm gonna stick this cotter pin down in there and bend it over and lock it down, and then we'll get that back cover put on. Okay, and I forgot to mention, but that cotter pin's a 5/32 by 2 or 2.5 inch. I can't remember the length. It's probably 2.5. Should be able to pick those up about any hardware store. Okay, so before we put this cover on, we gotta put an O-ring onto it, onto the actual cover. This O-ring from New Holland is an 87086S94. There's a number for it. Okay, and just like our axle seal, and pretty much every other seal and O-ring I put on, silicone lube. Now we'll get this put on, and we will probably have to wiggle the axle some to get it in there, and may end up having to tap it with a rubber mallet. I got a longer bolt here I'm actually going to use as a guide to make sure it goes on straight. Okay, and then once I get it down pretty decently. I'm gonna start putting the regular bolts in. And then we'll get these torqued down. And I'm gonna torque these to 45. And don't forget your shim pack from setting your bearing preload. So now the last piece to put on is the bottom cover plate. But before you do that, just go ahead and make sure your axle does move. That clanging is the backlash in the gear. If you can hear that, your axle moves. So the last thing you want to do is put all this together and your axle will be locked up. Kind of like how it was whenever I set this upper axle bearing clearance on this left hand side in previous videos. Okay, so the last step, aside from brake drum and adjusting our brakes, putting oil in it, is this bottom cover. The bottom cover gets a gasket, and I just made one. And these bolts are going to get torqued to 20 foot-pounds. So we're just going to go ahead and just put the cover on there. Now Eagle Eyes will notice I don't have the drain plug in here yet. I have new drain plugs for it, which I highly suggest putting new drain plugs in. I had to heat one of them up on one of these sides to get it out and completely destroyed it. I can't remember if they're 1/4 or 3/8. I'll look that up for you and put it at the bottom of the video. But the ones that I have are not plated, and I don't want them to rust and cause issues. So that's why they're not installed yet. But as soon as I get them plated, I will install them and then paint them blue. Okay, let's get these torqued down to 20 foot-pounds. And just start in the middle and work your way out. As far as this gearbox is concerned for oil, I'm going to put gear oil in this gearbox, some 80-90 weight oil. It's going to take 1.5 quarts per side.